I am drawn by women of all ages who have this something, this light that shines from within. And I am very grateful and happy that I actually know this interviewee in person. Teresa Bueno is a positive intelligence coach with 3 decades of coaching experience. Born in the North Georgia mountains, she has a beautiful accent. Teresa is passionate about living life to its fullest and helping others to do the same. From starting her own drafting design business in her 20s, she has continuously used her creative entrepreneurial spirit to start and build companies, including a real estate brokerage, small business coaching, and eco development. Her book is based on being a leaner, meaner senior. That is at the core of Teresa's philosophy. By meaner, Teresa explains that aging is an attitude, and I agree. Welcome, Teresa.
Thank you. It's so great to be here. I'm so glad you invited me.
Well, the reason I invited you is because you and I met at Florida Studio Theater, which is a small theater in Florida, in Sarasota. And I was taking improv lessons and I was very impressed by you. So what is your life today? What is your involvement with improv? You just celebrated a birthday on the stage.
Yes, I
Please tell me a little
did.
about that. Happy birthday,
Oh my
belated.
gosh. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, just Saturday, I turned 73 years old. And we had a great show. Performed on the main stage on Saturday night, which is always fun. And at the end of the show, when we were taking our final bows, some friends that I didn't even know were there, you know, came up on stage. Everybody knew about it but me. And they started playing Happy Birthday, and the crowd was singing. And they came. I was just stunned with flowers and the sash, birthday queen and the crown. It was the best birthday ever in my whole life. I tell you, everybody needs a birthday like that. I recommend you don't wait till you're 73, but it's maybe you can have more that way. But boy,
Mhm.
that was one for my record book. It was awesome. Awesome.
What does it feel like to be on the stage doing what you wanted to do apparently for a while and didn't
Yeah.
start until what age?
I took my first improv lesson when I was 66 years old. My husband and I moved to Costa Rica in 2006. And that was my one regret because I had become a fan of improv in Atlanta, where we lived back in the 90s. And it was like, oh, one of these days I want to take improv. And I just, how you put things off. I highly recommend people do not do that. If there is something that you love, you've got an inkling, or just like, if maybe, do not put it off, because that's one of the things, because I like to live my life with no regrets.
Mhm.
And that's one that kind of creeps in every once in a while, like, gosh, I wish I had started this back then. Probably my life would have had a completely different trajectory. Probably we wouldn't have gone to Costa Rica. There was like, who knows? But uh, it would be very hard for me to leave improv now.
Mm.
And I can imagine that it would have been then as well. So, anyway, so we moved and we were there for 10 years. And when it was time to come back, I really didn't want to. I mean, I enjoyed living in Costa Rica. I love wildlife. I love the jungle. I love the people. I love ballet. And
Oh,
loved it all. The music. It was so much fun. But it was time to grow up and go home. I was turning 65, and sadly, my mother had died. I was taken care of there in Costa Rica, and my father, who was also there with me, wanted to return to the States. So, my husband was here working. It just was like the adult thing to do. So as I like to say, put on my big girl panties and said, okay, we'll make the best of it. And came back to the States. But my consolation prize was, you're going to get to take improv lessons. And that would always make me feel better. So we got here, and my father became ill, and I had to take care of him. And he died about, oh wow, about 5 months after we got here. And that was devastating, having just lost my mother. So I was just like, then leaving Costa Rica, it's just like really down and out. And Then September, I started, September of 2017, I started taking my first improv class at FST, and I just fell in love. Fell in love with improv. I fell in love with the people. I fell in love with the community, and it's just been given me like this whole new lease on life, you know, and inspires me, and it's you know, it's I think that's the thing that I want for everybody. It doesn't, mine is improv. I don't
Right.
know what yours is, but somebody, you need to find your thing. Find your thing that you've always wanted to do, or maybe you didn't even know you wanted to do. But a
Hmm.
lot of us, I think, have these little inklings in the back of our mind, like uh, maybe like from whenever we were younger and had our families and stuff, that we had always wanted to fill in the blank, play the guitar, or sing, or paint, or whatever. But we were too busy, just too busy, and put it off. And so many people I talk to today think it's too late. And
What do you say
I,
to them? You
well,
laugh.
yeah, I laugh, and it's just, it's never too late. It's never too late. I mean, I wish I could remember the name of the author. I was going to look him up. Anyhow, he always wanted to write. He had been a magazine editor, and he retired. And when his wife died, he was 92 years old. And he was, after 70 years of marriage, he was despondent,
Yeah.
looking for something to entertain himself with. And he started writing. And he published his first book at 95, which went on to become a bestseller, acclaimed book. And then he wrote another one. And when he died in his early one, I think 101 or 102, he said, my most productive years of my life were my 90s. I was 90, so it was the most productive years of my life. So, it's just never too late. If you can fog a mirror,
Yeah.
you can live your life. So that I'm a firm believer, and one does not have to look far to see plenty examples.
I
They're all
agree.
around us.
I agree. And I especially agree with what you said about doing things that you didn't even know that you wanted to do. Like I didn't start improv with this lifelong desire to do improv at all. We started improv because we were having a very tough time with one of our kids and it was wrecking everything. And so I decided when COVID was over, no, we have to get out of the house. We have to be with
Yeah.
other people. And we both work from home, so it's even more so. And I was blown away by the community of people of all ages, where
Yeah.
the energy, and I don't mean some people, sometimes people think I mean having stamina, and that's not what I mean. I mean the vibe, the energy, the light that you speak of is what draws me to people. And the person could be 20 or they could be 90 or anywhere in between or
Yeah.
older. So that is something I'm terribly interested in. So right now, do you do improv full time, or what does your week look like, more or less?
Well, I would if I could, but you know,
Yeah.
that no, right now I do. Tonight I'm starting a class. This will be the first time we've kind of gone full circle, and I'm going to be leading a class that starts tonight for 8 weeks, and I'm really excited about it because it's something that's near and dear to my heart. Because inside my studies of improv. Um, I got started in the traditional way, learning the traditional things about improv is humor and comedy, which is fun, but then trying to always be funny was such
Mhm.
pressure, and so difficult and so forced and so unnatural. And then I saw a troupe out of LA called Impro LA, And what they did was unscripted plays.
Mm.
And I saw them perform at the Sarasota Improv Festival for the first time, along with two other classmates of mine.
Mm.
And that we had all graduated. We knew we wanted to do something, but we didn't know exactly what it was. When we saw that, we were just like, this is it. So we formed a troupe, a trio, and impromptu, and we started studying, performing, and doing what we called Southern Gothic. It was
Mm.
set in the mid-century, and like William Hinge, Tennessee Williams influence, and we started submitting our videos to different improv festivals and being accepted. And and it was we went we went to let's see, the first place we went was Chicago. And then we went all over the state, to California, went to Canada, then we went to England, and we went to Sweden, and then we went to Paris. We performed in a 700-seat theater in Paris, and they loved us. Everywhere we went, we were getting, like people, because it was unusual. People hadn't seen this kind of improv, and people were going, asking us if that was scripted. And it was like, what play was that? It was like, no, we just made it up, in the moment. So it was so, so, so rewarding. And so I love that kind of bringing soul, bringing
Mm.
heart, bringing authenticity to a story. Now that doesn't mean it can't be funny. We don't go through a day without laughing, right?
And
I mean,
sometimes laughing at horrible things, but humor.
exactly.
My dad has what he calls gallows humor, and I
Yeah,
inherited it because it's the only way to cope with the tough times, for real.
that's right. I mean, I don't think I've ever gone to a funeral that I didn't laugh.
You're so right. My God.
You get to talking about and remembering the times. And there's,
Oh gosh.
Meryl Streep said about, what was the movie, Angels in America? And she, they were asking her about the humor in that. And she pointed to that. She said, humor is always just under the surface, everywhere, all the time. And it's just like when we allow it to break through and break through in a natural way, an unforced way, it resonates. It resonates with the audience. People have like been there, they feel related to it, they understand it, so that kind of humor really, really appeals to me. And that's what my class is about, is helping improvisers tap into that authentic humor and allowing and perhaps even pointing to it, in situations as we take on different characters. So that's what I love. So that I start that tonight, and then I perform and I rehearse. I prefer to call it practice,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like you don't practice football. I mean, you don't rehearse football. You don't rehearse tennis. You
Very true.
practice the skills, and then you
Mm-hmm.
go play the game. And that to me is the way improv is. We practice the skills and then we
Yeah.
go perform. So I practice a lot with different people. So that's always like my dessert of life,
Mm-hmm.
is
Mm-hmm.
like, and I can just gobble it up all the time because love it so much. And here's the other thing about it is that most of the people I perform with are like younger than my children. They are my grandchildren's ages, than my age or even my children's age. So I have to have a certain level of fitness to keep up. And that's what inspires me, because I promise you, just because I know some people are passionate about it like you, and that's great and that's awesome that you can find your own intrinsic um, inspiration to do it. But it's been my experience, most people aren't that way. So, and if you want to be that way, you have to create your own motivation. like Joan Rivers said, if I don't exercise, if God had meant for me to exercise, he would have put diamonds on the floor, you know? So that's the point. We have to put our own diamonds on the floor.
Love it.
We have to find our diamonds, put them on the floor, because the only way we're going to get to them is being able to bend over. So, that's the same. That's the way I look at my exercise, is to be able to do what I want to do the way I want to do it. I have to keep this thing in in shape, or I don't
I
get to play.
I agree. I already told you separately from here that I'm not a disciplined person. I am just an obsessive compulsive person who learned to harness that and point it in directions that would be positive. So instead of being a drug addict, I became compulsive over, exercising or learning to dance and so every time that I take on something new, even say improv, I don't have acid. I go home away. Like I read and I signed up to the, in person, but I'm doing anyway but so I guess that most people are not that way. But that also brings me to your book that you co-authored, and the title is, you can show us the book, that would be
Yes,
amazing, because I have the Kindle copy that's not so attractive.
cleaner, meaner, senior.
And what was the seed for this book?
We wanted to write an exercise book, and this book has exercises in it, and we have a workbook that goes with it. And these are all, exercises for seniors who are probably not particularly active,
Mhm.
like for people to get started, and advances as well. But when we started with that, we realized that the very thing that we're talking about, and that is people have to be motivated. And so one of the things that we did was talk about why, you should be interested, and also, like the what we call the mindset monsters,
Mm.
that these notions that get into our heads, like, oh, it's too late, oh, I'm too old, oh, oh, I start things but I never finish, so why bother to even start? That these We talked about how this is an aspect of everyone's thinking, and that we can learn to recognize that and transfer it, which gets back to my PQ coaching, my positive intelligence coaching. If people have read the book, haven't, I highly recommend it, by Shazad Shamin. It was bestseller, I think, on New York's bestseller list in 2012, I think. Basically, is he talks about how our brains, the research that he did is at Stanford, that this part of our brain that what he calls the saboteurs, we call
Oh
them
yeah.
the mindset monster, they're there, and they're a particular part of our brains which is measurable. They know exactly where it exists. The thinking exists in our brain, and it's in the survival part of our brain,
Hmm.
and that's the job. It's to keep us safe. Our brain is not wired to make us great. Our brain is wired to keep you safe, under the radar, and reserve your resources. Do not, move any more than you have to. Eat as much of things that are going to make you fat as possible. This is the way we're wired. So it's not even like we're starting from, a level playing field. The odds are already stacked against us, because we have to overcome this.
Hmm.
One of the ways is recognizing what's at work, separating yourself from that, like the sage, that part of our brain, which is in part of the frontal lobe, that has the ability to feel the emotions, the positive emotions, fascination, exploration, interest, joy, love, those kinds of positive emotions or in another part of your brain. So if you can recognize that, this this reptilian part of your brain is the one that's keeping you safe and small and miserable, or you can recognize it, call it what it is, and shift to the sage. And there's techniques for doing that. Mostly they're about getting into your physical body and out of your head.
Yes,
And
yes.
that's a very empowering way to approach life, whether it be exercise or dance lessons or improv lessons and getting on the stage in front of,
Right.
150 people or 700 people.
Well,
So,
I'm even gonna go even simpler than that, like just going out for a walk. You know,
yeah,
it's like
exactly.
a lot of people, and I think also the like for a lot of people that's a big hurdle, like even just lacing their shoes up and saying I'm going to walk for 20 minutes. But the thing also I feel is that like I'm not a person who watches TV. I've never been that way. I'm more interested in reading, or nowadays, of course, I work in social media, so I consume a certain amount of that. But I feel that the messages, like for people who actually watch TV, we're being bombarded by get your lazy boy chair, and this is more
This
comfy,
medication.
this
Yeah.
medication, and instead of eating better, or instead of exercising, some passive form of, so it's kind of easy. And then if everyone around you is doing that, well, like I'm at the grocery store and I'm seeing what people are putting in their carts, and I'm like, I can't believe that, like there's no real food in there. And the problem is that if that's what's around you, you start thinking, I imagine that that's normal.
Exactly.
So I'm not a health nut in the sense that I deprive myself. And I also had a very severe eating disorder when I was young. So I am not a personal advocate for diets of any kind. And I think it's more trying to find a healthy relationship with body image and yourself, and all of this. But I do try to make healthier choices. And I feel I've really tried to raise my kids with that. Like, thankfully, they've never drank soda. Never.
Mm,
I mean, maybe
mm,
at a party, somebody offered it to them and they were like,
mhm,
ew, this
mhm.
doesn't taste well. And my 20-year-old doesn't like soda. And and I'm very proud of that because it would
Well,
have
you
been
should be.
very easy to just say, just have the soda. A fitness instructor in my 20s, and first people would say, you're in shape because you're young. And then people would say, you're in shape because you don't have kids. Then I had kids and I was older. And then they were like, well, you're in shape because you're not, I don't know, whatever, you don't have an illness, and I've had plenty of injuries. And now at 60, I still get told that. I still get told that I'm lucky, and I'm like, I'm not lucky. I mean, I'm lucky that I have legs. I am, but it's my decision to move them.
Yes.
A lot of people
Yes.
have
Yes.
legs, and
Yes.
then a lot of people don't have legs, and I'm speaking
And there's,
literally,
yes,
and they use prosthesis. Is that how you pronounce it? Prosthetics?
however, prosthetics, I think
Prosthetics.
is,
Thank you. And they're running marathons. So
yes.
it's to me, it's like to a large extent, it's this mindset. And I love hearing it from somebody who was older than myself, just because I have so much of that coming at me online and sometimes in person, like, you're so lucky, because of your,
Well, you may,
they don't know what I'm
if,
dealing with in my personal life. They don't know what injuries I have. I love
yeah,
your
well,
take
if,
on that. I will never tell a younger person, even on my worst day, because there are bad days, wait till you get to my age, like a threat.
I don't think I've ever said that, nor do I think I ever would, because first off, you know, I'm to a large degree no different behind my eyeballs than I was when I was, you know,
Yeah,
20. I mean, I'm certainly wiser and more experienced, but in terms of the my love of life, because here's the thing, Lorraine, I love living.
me too.
I love it. And the only way I get to do it is to have one of these,
Yeah,
you know? And I think that that's the thing when people, it's all about mindset and the way we frame things. If so many people think that they are their bodies, we're not the skin bag. We have this skin bag, but it's not us. It's something we have. It's our vehicle, just like we're not our car. Our car takes us places. It's a tool that we get to use, and so is our bodies. And unfortunately, most people take better care of their cars than they take of their bodies. They wouldn't think of putting, kerosene in a gasoline car because it's cheaper, convenient, or faster. You wouldn't do
Mm,
that. So it's that we just don't honor the gift that we have. And
agreed.
I think whenever somebody, then that light bulb goes off, whenever you have that
Ah,
moment that you like, OMG, what a gift this is. Sometimes it can stick around for a while. Sometimes it comes and then it goes, but for people, but that's the practice. And I think human beings, particularly women, cannot be their best self by themselves. We have to have the support of others to be or to help us, remind us of who we are, remind us of what's possible, remind us of our gifts, what is coming through us to give to the world.
why do you think
You know,
that is? You mentioned women, especially, and not men.
so I think women particularly because of the in this culture and Western culture, generally speaking, is the way we're raised. I mean, even when, of course, I am older, I'm 73, and when I was, a girl, I was very athletic, and I loved ball. I loved to play baseball. I loved to play football and all of that. But I remember when my father brought home a ball and a bat. I was about 7 years old. My brother was 5, and I had another one that was about 3. So Chris was about 5 years old, and Daddy brings home the ball and the bat, and he's tossing the ball. And of course, he's just a little kid, just stopping at it and what have you. And I was begging, Daddy, let me, Daddy, let me. And his words to me were, no, you just get over there. This is for boys.
Oh boy.
This is for boys. And then, of course, in the house, I had to be in the kitchen learning to cook and learning to do that while my brothers were outside playing. It was like the
Mm,
women, there was just a difference. There were It's like you have a path. Your lot in life is set. You are a woman, and it'll be like this, and we're raised. I mean, that has a big impact on a child,
mm,
because I remember being so frustrated because I was a girl and there was nothing I could do about it. All I could do was to get as good as I could at what I was doing and beat the boys and show my daddy that I could do it. And then, of course, I was doing really well at that till puberty. And then they all got bigger than me, like a whopping 5'3", and my brothers are both over 6 feet.
oh
It's
boy.
lucky it worked out that way. But anyhow, just when you're raised with this expectation that not only do our parents have about what's possible for women, but so does society at large. This whole thing about the imposter syndrome, and I've been hearing all about the C suite and how we don't have enough women in that echelon in corporate. And I heard somebody say, we need to do better about that. It's like, I think the opportunity is there.
Mhm.
It's the women have to own it, that they are capable, they are meant for it, that they have that capacity to step into those roles. I think they are available, but you just like in improv. In
Yep.
improv, when you go on the stage, even if you mess up, you've got to own it.
Yeah.
You've got to, if you start going, oh,
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
sorry, oh, just, oh, audience starts feeling sorry for you. It's just gets uncomfortable for everybody. But if you come in and mess up and say something backwards or wrong or go blank or whatever and own it, well, looky there. I just forgot what I was going to say again, that it becomes funny,
Yeah.
instead of apologetic. And I think it's the same everywhere in life. The world loves a winner, even when
Yep.
they're losing.
Yep. You know what's interesting when you were saying about being raised a certain way? I'm 60 years old and I was raised in Spain without a mother, a story for another day, but my Spanish grandmother, my father and my grandfather, and eventually my stepmother raised my sister and myself. And interestingly, even though Spain is a very, still is a male chauvinistic area of the world, to put it mildly, although they've come a long
Yes.
way. But I grew up with that. However, my grandfather eventually got, but always wanted a grandson. So my sister and I, instead of getting dolls for Christmas, we got boxing gloves, guns, slingshots, and these action got men and all that. So we had fun. We roughhoused with each other. We beat each other up. Like I don't even know how we're alive, you know. But now I think, wow, that was actually my grandfather gave us a gift because we were never treated like, oh, these little girls. It was like, no, he wanted two boys and he kind of got them because we were like tomboys. So I think that was a big gift. And because my grandfather and my father my grandfather was an eccentric and he just paved his own way, and my dad eventually did too. I just knew that I didn't want to conform to society and I didn't want a job. And I've managed to make a living for 40 years without having a 9 to 5 ever,
Hmm.
which is
That's
crazy.
great.
It is and it isn't because I was considered a failure because it was like, well, why can't Lorraine have a job? Because I don't want one. And it was, I learned how to telecommute without any internet. We don't even have cell phones. Faxes were starting. I didn't understand how that worked, but I managed to work with, back then I was doing dubbing work, like adapting sitcoms from English to Spanish for Spain
Hmm.
in my
Hmm.
20s. And I told the guy one day, well, I'm moving away but I want to keep working for you. And he's like, oh, no, you can't because of whatever. I said, no, I'll pay a courier to bring the scripts. I have, a typewriter. And anyway, I figured it out. And so I feel like I've lived my whole life like there was internet. So I also feel, and I don't really know where I got all that. So I think it's also like a mindset. And I always walked in places knowing I was this woman, that the first thing they were going to see was that I was a woman and I was going to get harassed and all kinds of things. And I had to put up with it because with gigs, you can lose it very easily. So
Hmm.
I traded my skirts for suits, pantsuits always, and
Hmm.
always walked in like I was really sure of myself, even if I was shaking. And
Hmm.
I walked into a room one day with a bunch of guys with Cuban cigars, and that was the group I was interpreting for. And I walked in and my throat closed down from the being nervous. And I was like,
Hmm.
oh my God. I went to the bathroom, somehow made an excuse, and I freaking powered through the whole thing, came out alive. And that's how I've always operated. But it wasn't because I was sure of myself. And I think to this day, I feel that this imposter syndrome to a certain extent is a good thing, because if we don't have it, then we won't be open to learning. And I feel every time like things I've been a writer all my life and I still doubt myself. But I think that keeps me humble and it keeps me wanting more.
The other thing that I want to point to, and that is that you powered through. And every
Mm,
time you powered through, there's a potential that's going to give you more confidence. So the next time you go into that situation, you have this recall of like, oh yeah, remember those men with the cigars? I
oh my
handled
God.
that. I
Yeah.
ate that. If I can do that, this is a piece of cake.
Yeah.
So that brings that a level of confidence that we can take with us. That's what experience does.
Yeah.
It increases. As far as I can tell at this point, the only way to get confidence is through experience, with the exception possibly of visualization, which
Yeah.
is a type of experience in itself. Regardless of your perspective, it cannot be an excuse for not acting. Like, oh, well, I was raised in this way, and I was like taught that not being boy, I was a loser. Yeah, and maybe I even bought into that stuff on a certain level. That's just part of the grist for the mill. That's
Mm,
just part of what there is for me in living my life that's going to make me stronger, that's going to make me better. And by better, I mean living my life more fully
Mm-hmm.
is based on my own beliefs, my own desires, my own gifts, what I'm here to provide. So I don't think it is a reality. It is reality. And just like I was talking about before, like our brains are wired a certain way. We don't get to start with a level playing field.
Mm-mm.
That doesn't mean we don't get to play, you
True.
know,
True.
and like maybe we have a handicap, so big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, women have always had handicaps.
Yes.
Look at, Fred Astaire and Ginger
Mhm.
Rogers. She did everything he did, only backwards with heels, so it's
Yeah.
what we do. My mama said women have to be 2 times better to be thought half as good as men.
Yeah.
And that's the way it was in the day. Thankfully, it's changing. It's not the way it is anymore. Doesn't mean we get to be complacent.
It's interesting because I feel I had a really rough childhood in some ways, and not being raised by a mother who disappeared from my life when I was 4. For a long time, that was my story in my brain, right? This is something that is terrible, and eventually I went to therapy and continued to work on that. And I feel like we are not our circumstances.
Mm.
We can like everybody has very hard stuff that we all go through, and it's in how you handle it. Is there any example that you can give of a time in your life where you thought, oh boy, I'm never going to get out of this, but then you did and came out with flying colors eventually?
This is a very personal one. When I was 17, I got pregnant. In the South was not a good thing. At my mother's insistence, gave the baby up for adoption. Back then in 1969, I was the shame of the family. It was just the humiliation was just horrific. And that had a huge impact on me, on everything about me. I was, to go through something like that at 17,
Mm,
the combination of the loss, the horrible loss of the child, and the shame I had brought on my family, and all of that was really, really hard. I have to say, everything I've faced since then has always been, well, if I could get through that, I can get through this. That has kept me inspired and motivated. And I just keep on keeping on. Like when I started drafting in 1974, the first job that I was hired for, the guy said, it was my idea to hire a woman because we didn't have to pay them as much and we don't have to promote them. And I'm sitting there going, yep, because that was the reality of the world. That was the reality. I took that job for $400 a month on the job training. I was supposed to get a raise in 6 weeks. He said to me, now don't get mercenary on me. You stay at this for 6 more weeks and I can get you a good raise. Well, I started looking in the newspaper. I found an ad, have wanted a junior drafter, and I've only been drafting for 4 weeks. And I went and I applied. And here's the thing was that my father had given me a book, Lazy Man's Way to Riches. And I thought it was the biggest bunch of junk I had ever read. I was so down and out. And I was divorced, 2 small children, and struggling, no financial support from anybody. And you've been there, you know what I'm
yeah.
talking about.
Yeah.
So I told him, I'm going to read your stupid book and I'm going to do everything it says. And with my full intention, and I think I even said to him, to prove to you that this is a bunch of bunk. And I did. And RSVP, read, study, visualize, perform. Write your goals on these cards. Read them every night, every morning. Study them, then visualize it, and then performance would come. And I had programmed for a $75 raise. That's what I was going to get. My 400 was going to be 475. And I did it. I did it. And I started believing it. I really started believing it. So when I went in there and I didn't get that raise, I was devastated. But then something else happened that really irked me. And that's when I went and looked for the other job. And I went in for the interview at the other job. They looked at my work and he says, well, we're prepared to offer you $475. So I got this huge lesson right out of right out of the chute, that it doesn't always come the way you think it will. I got that. And I also got a second lesson. What if I had done what my father said and visualized $100 instead of 75? I would have probably got $100. So that all of this, started empowering me, knowing this history that I'd come from, having this learning to tap into the power of my mind, really propelled me forward. And within a year, less than a year, I was making $800 a month, and then I went on to own my own drafting and design business. So then from there, I went into real estate and started doing it. But I've always had this entrepreneurial spirit as well. So to answer your question, I know I would not be the person I am today if it were not for the hardships that I endured. So I see hardships now as a growth opportunity.
You are so right.
Some sometimes it's with a little sarcasm. Oh,
Yeah.
here we go, another friggin' growth opportunity.
They're
They are,
hard. They're
yes,
hard.
that's how you know they're a opportunity, because
I know. Trust me.
usually growth
Yeah.
opportunities are not easy.
But
So,
that's where I feel that it differentiates people. Like you either have that fire in you where you're like, well, and I mean I'm the first person to admit that I've and I've shared that with you. I've had depression, like clinical depression, or they call it major depressive disorder, but the kind that just knocks you out and you're like you're depressed. I mean, it's not a bad day. I wish. But it's also in the wanting to conquer that because one thing I say is nobody can ever accuse me of not trying.
yeah,
It's in the not giving up and saying, okay, I know there's something that I need to figure out in myself when I was so depressed and so young and not finding meaning in life. And so I was scared of that. And I was like, no, this is not how I'm meant to be. I need to get out of this. And I was 17 when I went to my first therapist, I think it was. I was around the age you were, but for different reasons. I was in a in
mhm,
a in a hole myself. And it was in at least trying to figure it out. And that self-awareness that not everybody has, which is a blessing and a curse, I think, because for me it's like, oh my gosh, I'm aware of this in myself. And sometimes it's hard because it's hard to admit whatever, that I
yeah,
that I can be too sensitive or that I can be, I don't know, not let people talk or things like that, but it happens. And I think that I even tell Phil, my husband, that sometimes it's hard to have a conscience even because you're like, damn it, I can't like keep the money the cashier gave me because I couldn't sleep, it was the
yeah, yeah,
wrong
yeah,
change. So
yeah.
all those are little tests. And every time I meet someone who's like you, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so drawn. Like I can't be around people who, I mean, I will if I have to, but it's not my choice to spend too much time with people who are not like overflowing with this great energy. you know?
I know what you mean. It's a challenge. And one thing I want to say before we move on is to kind of wrap up.
Mm-hmm,
Thanks to 23andMe,
mm-hmm,
I
mm.
I was able to connect with my uh, son that was adopted.
I didn't want to ask you because I didn't want to be intrusive, but oh my God,
And
really?
yes, yes, yes. I did 23andMe for a whole other reason, because both my grandmother and my mother both died with dementia, Alzheimer's. And so it was like, and I wanted to have an idea if I had like how bad my chances were, because I feel forewarned is forearmed. And if I know it, then I have the opportunity to address it. And that's just the way I am. So it's like, I want to find this out. And that's why I went into it. And then in that process, it was like, do you want to know your relatives? And I was thinking, oh, my brother did this. I wonder if he's going to show up. It's just playing with it like that. And then what it's like, it was so funny. It's like, are you, are you sure you want to know your relatives? And it was like, yes, yes. Are you really, really, really sure? Yes. Are you really? I was like, yes, 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 yes. And then first one that pops up was, you know, his name and likely a relationship son. And it just, just floored me, floored me. You could reach out, and I did. And he immediately responded. We talked within minutes after I discovered him. And he'd been looking for me for years. He was afraid that I was dead because he was looking at in the wrong place. And anyhow, it's a beautiful story. And he's successful and happy and wonderful. And he said, one of the things, he said, first thing I want you to know is that I have no anger, no resentment. I only have joy that I have finally found you. Yeah, yeah. That's just what kind of great guy he is. So, we talk regularly, we text, and we're in touch with each other, and it's just amazing, this gift that has come back to me after, I think, 52 years he was whenever he came back to me. So it's just been just fabulous. So I just wanted to put that in there because I think it's an important part of the story, that because I did everything I could to make myself available to him, but he was just looking in the wrong place and wasn't finding this. So,
Well, I'm
mhm.
so grateful that you shared that. I did not want to ask. I never want to disrespect anybody's personal life, but I'm like you, I'm an open book.
Hopefully, it's like it can help somebody
Yeah,
else. You know
yeah,
what I mean? I try to learn from other people's mistakes. I'm not going to live long enough to make them all my own.
that's so true. Thank you again for that beautiful story and heart story. What is in store for you? I know this is a tough one because I like for myself, I don't really know because I'm constantly surprised by life and sometimes in a bad way, but then I grow from it and then in a great way that I start doing things I never knew were possible.
Hmm.
Do you have anything in mind for the
I
future?
do. I do.
Oh,
I do. I'm doing public speaking, performing, and I want to start doing some content myself, start working with social media. And of course I do my coaching still. I do coaching, and I want to write another book. I want to write a book specifically about that, full self-expression. It's you know, like, don't start the funeral. I'm not dead yet, you know. And let's go live, people. It's no
yeah.
time to be going out to pasture.
No,
We
not
know
at all.
we know more than we have ever known. We have
Yeah.
more to offer than we have ever. Get out there. Just write, coach workshops, and preach. I'm gonna preach, sister.
Yeah, you're a
Preach,
good
preach.
preacher too. I mean, I've been in your classes and I've watched you on stage and you never cease to amaze me in wonderful ways. And you also inspire me endlessly because I truly, truly believe that at 60, I'm just getting started. And I've done plenty of
You
things
are.
in my life, but I do feel that. And I don't meet that many older women that tell me you're right.
Oh, you are. Let me tell you, this is like the third act. I
Yeah,
love to use the theater now.
yeah.
This is like the third act. This pulls everything together. You're entering into the third act of life.
Hmm.
You get to pull the first act, the second act. You're getting to pull it all together and bring it together in a way that starts making sense. That you can now that climax comes like what's possible starts to manifest in a way that it could never manifest before. You didn't have then what you have now, girl, and you're just going to keep getting more and more of it. I couldn't do what I'm doing now when I was your age. I have learned so much, Lorraine, so much over these last 13 years. Life has a lot to offer, if you're just open to it.
I agree. If people want to find you, which they will want to, where would they go online?
Just Google leadermeanersenior.com and you can find me.
So
And I would love.
leanermeanersenior.com. And I promise that
Mhm.
Teresa gives tons of great suggestions to live a better life. And the most important thing is that you embody it. So
Thank you so
thank you
much.
so much for accepting my invite.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.